For 4,000 years, a clay tablet sat in the basement of the British Museum, sealed in protective resin and marked as too fragile to translate. Museum records listed it as catastrophically damaged, its cuneiform text corrupted by time and moisture. Catalogued in 1876 after being pulled from the ruins of Nippur in modern-day Iraq, it was photographed once, filed, and forgotten. Too broken to read, too risky to handle, just another artifact in a collection of over 130,000 untranslated Sumerian tablets gathering dust in storage. But in 2019, a team of researchers using multispectral imaging technology designed for NASA finally penetrated the resin seal without touching the tablet itself. What they found was not just another administrative record about grain shipments or temple offerings. The text describes something called the return cycle, a specific astronomical alignment that would signal when they come back. And according to the translation, that alignment is approaching faster than anyone expected. The researchers published their findings in a peer-reviewed archaeology journal, then went silent. No follow-up papers, no media interviews. The lead translator, Dr. Michael Westenrea from Oxford, retired abruptly 6 months later. When asked about the tablet in a brief email exchange, he wrote 4 words. "We translated it correctly." Then he stopped responding. The tablet describes beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, not as myths, not as gods in the way we think of religion, as physical entities who came from somewhere else, altered human genetics, built the first cities, and promised they would return when the celestial calendar completed its cycle. And the tablet gives a timeline encoded in astronomical data that modern software can now calculate with terrifying precision. If you want to understand how ancient texts keep predicting things that sound like science fiction until they start coming true, subscribe. I break down discoveries like this every week that make you question everything you thought you knew about human history. Now let's talk about what this tablet actually says. The civilization that appeared out of nowhere. The Sumerians appeared out of nowhere around 4,500 BCE in southern Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They had no evolutionary predecessor, no gradual development from hunter-gatherer tribes. One moment, there are scattered settlements of primitive farmers. The next there is a full-blown civilization with written language, advanced mathematics, sophisticated astronomy, irrigation systems, metallurgy, and urban planning. Archaeologists call this the Sumerian problem. How does a civilization emerge fully formed with knowledge that should have taken thousands of years to develop? The Sumerians themselves answered that question in their texts. They said the knowledge came from the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, not metaphorical heaven, actual sky, actual descent. The Sumerian king list, a historical document that chronicles every ruler of ancient Sumer, describes kings who reigned for thousands of years before the Great Flood. Then it says, the kingship was lowered from heaven. That is the exact phrase, lowered from heaven. After the flood, human kings ruled for normal lifespans. The text draws a clear line between 2 eras. Before the Anunnaki left, when godlike beings governed directly, and after they left, when humans ruled alone. For centuries, scholars dismissed these texts as mythology. Exaggerated king lists meant to legitimize royal bloodlines. Flood narratives borrowed and distorted over generations. Gods and heroes inflated into cosmic proportions, just stories. But then we started finding the cities. Uruk, Eridu, Nippur, Lagash, massive urban centers with populations in the tens of thousands, built with engineering precision that rivals modern construction. The ziggurats, stepped pyramids that served as temples and administrative centers, were aligned to specific stars with astronomical accuracy. The Sumerians tracked Venus with such precision that their calculations of its orbital cycle are off by modern measurements by only a few hours over a 500-year period. They knew things they should not have known. They had star charts showing planets that were not rediscovered until the invention of the telescope. They described Saturn as having rings. They depicted the solar system with the sun at the center, not the Earth. This was 4,000 years. before Copernicus, and they said all of this knowledge came from the Anunnaki, beings who descended from a planet called Nibiru, which followed an elliptical orbit that brought it into the inner solar system every 3,600 years. During these orbital approaches, the Anunnaki would return to Earth, check on their creation, and deliver new instructions before leaving again. The mainstream response to this is simple. The Sumerians were brilliant astronomers who figured this out through observation. And the Anunnaki stories are just how they explained natural phenomena they did not understand, gods as metaphors for planets, myths as primitive science. But the sealed tablet complicates that explanation because it does not read like mythology. It reads like a schedule. What the tablet actually says. The tablet, now catalogued as MS-3848 in the British Museum's digital archives, is written in a dialect of Akkadian mixed with older Sumerian logograms. Multispectral imaging revealed text that was invisible to the naked eye, buried under centuries of mineral deposits and resin coating. Researchers used infrared and ultraviolet light at specific wavelengths to make the cuneiform impressions stand out from the background clay. What they found was a star chart, not symbolic, literal astronomical positions of celestial bodies at specific dates. The tablet describes a conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in the constellation we now call Aquarius. It lists the position of Venus relative to the Pleiades star cluster. It references the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that changes which stars appear in the night sky over thousands of years. The tablet then says the following: when the wandering stars align in the house of the water-bearer, and the bright one stands at the shoulder of the seven sisters, the path opens. The Anunnaki who departed in the time of great waters shall return as they promised. The first sign is the fire in the sky. The second sign is the shaking of the foundation. The third sign is the voice that speaks without sound. The researchers fed the astronomical data into software used by NASA to calculate historical star positions. The alignment described in the tablet, the exact configuration of planets and stars, happens rarely. The last time it occurred was around 3,100 BCE, right before the Sumerian civilization exploded into existence. The next time it happens is 2029. 6 years from now, Dr. Westenra's team published this finding in the Journal of Cuneiform Studies in 2020. The paper was titled Astronomical Precision in Late Sumerian Prognostication Texts. Dry, academic, buried in technical language about ecliptic coordinates and sexagesimal mathematics. But on page 14, in a footnote, Westenra wrote something unusual for a peer-reviewed paper. The precision of the astronomical calculations in MS-3848 exceeds the known capabilities of Sumerian observational astronomy by several orders of magnitude. No explanation consistent with current historical models accounts for this discrepancy. Translation. They should not have been able to calculate this, but they did. The tablet goes further. It describes what happens during the return cycle, not in mythological language, in procedural language, like instructions. The first who return are the Watchers. They arrive before the alignment completes to prepare the way. They move among men unseen, taking measure of what has been built, what has been forgotten. They mark those who carry the old blood, the line unbroken since the time of mixing. Old blood, the line unbroken since the time of mixing. The old bloodlines. The Sumerians were obsessed with bloodlines. Their king lists did not just record names. They recorded genealogies going back to the Anunnaki themselves. They described a time when the Anunnaki interbred with humans, creating hybrid bloodlines that ruled as priest-kings. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history, describes its hero as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, not metaphorically divine. The text literally describes his mother as a goddess, Ninsun, and his father as a human king. Gilgamesh was said to possess superhuman strength, extended lifespan, and knowledge beyond normal men. The story treats this as biological fact, not poetic exaggeration. Other Sumerian texts describe the Me, which were objects or data storage devices that contained the fundamental knowledge of civilization. Whoever possessed the me controlled access to advanced knowledge in mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, law, and agriculture. These were not abstract concepts. The text described them as physical objects that could be stolen, lost, or transferred. In one story, the goddess Inanna gets the god Enki drunk and steals the me from him, transporting them to her city of Uruk. If the me were just symbolic representations of knowledge, why describe them as things that can be physically moved? Why have entire myths about stealing them and hiding them? The sealed tablet mentions the me directly. It says, "When the watchers complete their survey, the gatekeepers arrive. They carry the me of renewal, the patterns that remake what was broken. Those who remember the old covenants will be called. Those who forgot will be left to the rising waters." Rising waters. That is a reference to the flood narrative that appears in Sumerian texts thousands of years before the biblical version. The Epic of Atrahasis describes the Anunnaki deciding to wipe out humanity with a flood because humans had become too numerous and too noisy. But one Anunnaki, Enki, warned a human named Atrahasis to build a boat and save his family and animals. After the flood, the Anunnaki decided to limit human lifespan and reduce fertility so the population would not explode again. Every culture on Earth has a flood myth. More than 200 distinct flood narratives come from civilizations that had no contact with each other. The details vary, but the core is always the same. A global catastrophe, divine beings decide to reset humanity, and a chosen few survive to rebuild. Mainstream archaeology explains this as cultural memory of localized floods exaggerated into global mythology. But the Sumerian version is strangely specific. It gives dimensions for the boat. It describes the duration of the rain and the flood. It names the mountain where the boat landed, Mount Nisir, which is a real mountain in the Zagros range. And now, this tablet is saying it will happen again, not as punishment, but as part of a cycle. The rising waters linked to the return of the Anunnaki. The secondary markers researchers have tried to debunk the 2029 alignment. They argue that the tablet's astronomical references are too vague to pin down exact dates. They say the translation is speculative, assigning modern astronomical terms to ancient descriptions that could mean many things. Westenra's team is accused of overinterpreting poetic language as literal prediction. But there is a problem. The tablet describes secondary markers, backup signals in case the primary alignment is not enough. In the season before the return, the earth groans with increasing fury. Mountains that slept since the time of the great cold awaken with fire. The seas rise and swallow the coasts where men built their towers of pride. Sickness moves through the nations unseen and without cure, carried by the very air. Earthquakes, volcanic activity, rising sea levels, global pandemics. These could describe almost any period of human history, vague prophecy that fits whatever disaster people are currently experiencing. Except for one detail, the tablet says these events do not happen randomly. They follow a pattern tied to the position of Nibiru as it enters the inner solar system. The gravitational influence of a large planetary body passing through destabilizes the orbits of other planets, causing increased tectonic activity, climate disruption, and electromagnetic interference. This is where it gets controversial. Mainstream astronomy says there is no Planet X, no Nibiru, no undiscovered massive planet in our solar system. We have mapped everything, and we have calculated orbital mechanics. If a planet-sized object were approaching the inner solar system on a 3,600-year orbit, we would see it. We would have detected it decades ago. But in 2016, researchers at Caltech published evidence for what they called Planet 9, a massive planet 10 times the mass of Earth orbiting far beyond Neptune. They inferred its existence from the strange clustered orbits of distant objects in the Kuiper Belt. Something massive is out there pulling on those objects, bending their orbits in ways that only make sense if there is a large planet we have not seen yet. The researchers were careful to say this is not Nibiru, but the discovery reignited the question. If there is one massive planet we did not know about, could there be another? The sealed tablet describes Nibiru's approach not just through gravitational effects, but through electromagnetic phenomena. The sky burns with colors never seen. The night glows as if lit by an unseen sun. The lodestone loses its way, and birds fall confused from the air. Aurora activity, magnetic field disruption. These are things that happen when Earth's magnetosphere is hit by charged particles from the sun. But the tablet says it happens when Nibiru is near, suggesting the planet itself generates or channels electromagnetic energy in ways our current understanding of planetary physics does not account for. The Sitchin predictions. Zecharia Sitchin, the researcher who popularized the Anunnaki theory in the 1970s through his book The 12th Planet, was widely dismissed by academics for claiming the Sumerians had knowledge of Nibiru that modern science did not possess. He translated ancient texts literally, arguing that when the Sumerians described gods descending from the sky and flying objects, they meant exactly that. Physical craft, not metaphors. Sitchin's translations were criticized as inaccurate. Scholars fluent in Sumerian said he mistranslated key terms, cherry-picked texts that supported his theory, and ignored context. He was not a trained linguist. He was an independent researcher working from a fringe perspective. But Sitchin made specific predictions based on his reading of Sumerian texts. He said we would discover a 10th planet in the outer solar system. In 2005, Eris was discovered, a dwarf planet beyond Pluto. He said ancient texts described genetic engineering, the deliberate manipulation of human DNA by the Anunnaki. In 2003, the Human Genome Project confirmed that human DNA contains sequences that appear to have been inserted rather than evolved, segments that do not match the gradual mutation pattern seen in other species. Sitchin died in 2010. He never saw the sealed tablet translated, but the text describes exactly what he said it would: a return cycle, an astronomical trigger, and instructions for those who remain. Ascension or cleansing. The third section of the tablet is the most disturbing. It describes what the Anunnaki expect to find when they return. It says the following: if the children of clay have risen to the stars and speak across the void, they are ready for the next ascension. If they still war among themselves and poison the garden, they are marked for another cleansing. The watchers will deliver the count of the worthy. The gatekeepers will separate the harvest. The children of clay, that is what the Sumerians called humanity, created from clay and the blood of a lesser god, shaped by Enki to serve as workers for the Anunnaki. The texts are explicit about this. Humans were genetically engineered to be a labor force. The Anunnaki needed workers to mine gold, which they required for purposes the texts never fully explain. Modern fringe theorists suggest the gold was used to repair Nibiru's deteriorating atmosphere, that the Anunnaki were a dying civilization trying to save their planet. Mainstream academics dismiss this as science fiction projected onto ancient mythology. But the Sumerian texts are oddly specific about gold. The city of Eridu, the oldest city according to Sumerian records, was built near what are now confirmed to be some of the oldest gold mining sites in the Middle East. Radiocarbon dating places mining activity in the region as far back as 6000 BCE, predating any known civilization that should have had the metallurgical knowledge to extract and refine gold. The tablet says the Anunnaki will evaluate humanity based on two criteria. First, technological advancement, specifically space travel and long-distance communication. Second, moral development, whether humans have transcended tribal conflict and ecological destruction. We have achieved the first. Humans have been to space. We communicate across the planet instantly. We have sent probes beyond the solar system. By the tablet's standard, we have risen to the stars. But the second criterion is where it gets grim. We are still at war, still poisoning the environment. By any measure, we have met the technological threshold, but failed the moral one, and according to the tablet, that determines what happens next. Ascension or cleansing. Ascension means genetic upgrading. The Anunnaki modified human DNA once to create us. The text suggests they can do it again. unlocking latent abilities, extending lifespan, enhancing cognition. Evolution by intervention, not natural selection. Cleansing is simpler, a reset. Reduce the population, wipe out power structures, start over with a selected remnant. The flood narrative was a previous cleansing. The tablet suggests fire, plague, and collapse of the sky are alternative methods. The question that keeps researchers up at night is whether this is prophecy or schedule. Is the tablet predicting what might happen or describing what will happen according to a plan set in motion thousands of years ago? If the Anunnaki are real, if they operate on timescales humans cannot comprehend, a 3,600-year orbital cycle is nothing. They could seed a planet with a genetically modified workforce, leave for a few orbits, and check back later. From their perspective, we are a crop they planted, and 2029 is harvest time. Dr. Westenra's abrupt retirement makes more sense in that context. If you translate a text that describes a species more advanced than humanity scheduled to return in 6 years, and that text reads like an operational manual rather than mythology, what do you do with that information? Publish it and cause mass panic? Bury it and hope you misunderstood? He chose a middle path. Publish in an obscure academic journal where it would be preserved but largely ignored, then disappear before anyone asks follow-up questions. Other researchers have tried to access the original tablet for independent verification. The British Museum has refused all requests, citing the tablet's fragility. The multispectral imaging data that revealed the hidden text has not been made publicly available. Westenra's co-authors, Dr. Sarah Apprentice and Dr. Amir Nazari, have both declined to comment on the record. When pressed, Apprentice said that the translation stands as published. Interpretation is beyond their scope. That is a strange thing for an archaeologist to say. Interpretation is literally their job. Unless the interpretation led somewhere they did not want to go. The convergence of prophecies. The timing of the 2029 alignment has not gone unnoticed. Online forums exploded when the paper was published. Independent researchers started cross-referencing the tablet's data with other prophecies. The Mayan long count calendar, which famously ended in 2012, was recalculated by some scholars who argue the original conversion was off by 17 years. The corrected end date is 2029. Hopi prophecies describe the return of the star people when a blue star appears and the earth shakes. The blue star, according to some interpretations, is a planet reflecting sunlight. Nibiru, if it exists, would be an ice giant like Neptune. Blue. The Book of Revelation describes a star called wormwood falling from heaven and poisoning the waters, a celestial object bringing catastrophe, a return of judgment. Are these describing the same event from different cultural perspectives, or is this pattern seeking? Humans desperate to find meaning? The problem is the convergence. The Sumerian tablet gives 2029. The recalculated Mayan calendar gives the same year. The Hopi prophecies describe signs that match increasing seismic activity, which has measurably increased. Earth's magnetic field is weakening at an accelerating rate. These could all be coincidences, natural cycles unrelated to ancient prophecies. But the sealed tablet does not just predict these events. It explains them as consequences of Nibiru's approach. Gravitational and electromagnetic interference from a massive planetary body entering the inner solar system. And if that is true, we should be able to detect it. If a planet 10 times the mass of Earth is 6 years away from an inner solar system alignment, it should be visible. Amateur astronomers with backyard telescopes should be spotting it, unless it is not coming from where we expect. The tablet describes Nibiru's orbit as highly elliptical, angled relative to the plane of the solar system. It does not approach from the ecliptic, where we do most of our sky surveys. It comes from below or above, from a direction we watch less carefully. And if it is approaching from the southern celestial hemisphere, it would only be visible from certain latitudes. There have been reports. In 2020, astronomers in Chile reported an anomalous infrared signature that did not match any known object. The data was flagged as instrumental error. In 2022, amateur astronomers in Australia claimed to have imaged a large dark object moving against the background stars. Their findings were debunked as a camera smudge. But the reports keep coming, always from the southern hemisphere, always dismissed. The witness account. The final section of the sealed tablet is the part that made Westenra retire. It is written in a different hand, added later, possibly by a scribe who witnessed something and felt compelled to record it. I saw them in the 14th year of King Ur-Nammu. 3 watchers descended in the night, their craft silent as falling stars. They wore the faces of men, but stood taller than any warrior. They spoke the old tongue, the language of the first city, and they asked for the king. They examined the grain stores, the ziggurat heights, the star charts we had preserved. They did not speak of when they would return. They only said the cycle continues. We are not forgotten. The 14th year of King Ur-Nammu's reign was approximately 2100 BCE. The tablet was sealed and preserved shortly after. Why? Why take a routine visitation report and seal it for 4,000 years? Unless it was not routine. Unless the watchers told them something, gave them a warning or a promise, or instructions they were told to hide until the alignment approached again. And now the seal has been broken. The text revealed just in time for the next cycle. If you are thinking this sounds too organized to be coincidence, you are not alone. The timing of the tablet translation, the technology that made it possible, the publication right before the predicted alignment, it all feels orchestrated. But by whom? The researchers did not know the text was prophetic when they started imaging the tablet. They thought it was another economic record, unless someone knew. Unless there are people who have been waiting for this alignment, preserving knowledge, preparing. The Sumerians had secret societies, priesthoods that guarded astronomical knowledge. Those traditions did not die with Sumer. They were absorbed into Babylon, then Persia, then into mystery schools that persist today. The conspiracy version asks whether the Watchers never fully left, whether the bloodlines the tablet mentions have been maintaining contact across centuries, steering civilization towards specific milestones, making sure we are ready when the alignment comes. The rationalist version is simpler. The tablet is misinterpreted. The astronomical alignment is real, but the prophetic reading is projection. We see what we want to see. Except the British Museum verified the tablet's authenticity. Radiocarbon dating of organic residue in the clay confirmed it was fired in the early 2nd millennium BCE. The cuneiform style matches other tablets from that period. The resin seal was documented in museum records from 1876, long before the Anunnaki theory existed. So either the Sumerians made an incredibly lucky guess about planetary positions 4,000 years in the future, or they had knowledge they should not have possessed. And if they had that knowledge, they got it from somewhere or someone. 6 years. 6 years. That is what the tablet gives us. 6 years to watch the sky, monitor the signs, and see if ancient prophecy turns into modern reality. The researchers will not talk. The institutions will not release the data. But the alignment is coming whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars in Aquarius. Venus at the Pleiades. The configuration the Sumerians said would open the path. And if they are right, if the Anunnaki kept their promise, we are about to find out what 3,600 years of separation looks like when it ends. Whether they come as saviors offering ascension or as judges bringing cleansing. The tablet does not say which, it only says they are coming back. If this made you rethink what ancient civilizations actually knew, click the next video on screen. I break down another discovery that suggests human history is way older and way stranger than we have been told. And if you made it this far, subscribe. You are clearly someone who wants answers, not the sanitized version that keeps you comfortable.